This week's episode of Excelsior Journeys is brought to you by Main's Playing Cards. Please go to mainsplayingcards.com to get your own limited edition deck. This week I had the pleasure of sitting down with podcaster and radio personality Mike Seibert. Mike has been running his own podcast for over 3 years. I am still shocked that, considering his tastes, that we have only met just this past month. It was a really great conversation, had a lot of fun with him. I know you're going to have a blast. JLD, do the honors.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of the award-winning podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire, and you're listening to the Excelsior Journeys with George Sirois. Prepare to ignite.
Is there a burning desire within to share your creativity with the rest of the world? Do you insist on pursuing your passion by any means necessary? Then you are on an Excelsior journey, and you are not alone. Welcome back to Excelsior Journeys. This is George Sirois, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for tuning in for almost 100 episodes. We are so close, and I have so much fun prepared for you for the month of August. This is going to be a blast doing this August miniseries, the 5-parter celebrating the 35th anniversary of Transformers the movie. If you are a Transformers fan, you are going to love this. It's going to be so much fun. If you have been enjoying the show overall, I've been doing this since 2018. We are not stopping anytime soon. Please give it a share, a rate, a review. You can even go ahead and click on the Buy Me a Coffee link. It's all on the homepage for the podcast, which is he'sgotit.com/podcasts. Please note that there are over a dozen different platforms you can choose from to subscribe. In addition to Apple, Google, TuneIn, Spotify, Podbean, I'm also on Amazon, also on iHeartRadio, also on Pandora. Still can't believe that. Now, this month I've been taking the time to go around social media to really kind of spread the word about the Transformers the movie miniseries. And there are a lot of groups that make up Transformers fandom on Facebook. This one particular Facebook group, I still cannot believe that I had not gotten there earlier, but it is called Transformers Till All Are One, where fans and talent come together. And that is not hyperbole. There are different people that are associated with Transformers that are there, that are part of the site. And it is a blast getting to know everyone, getting to share this kind of news. It is really exciting. Everyone is really pumped up, not only for the 35th anniversary, but also for the War for Cybertron Kingdom miniseries that is ready to come out on Netflix. There's so much that's going on with this fandom. It is really, really awesome. And one of the people that I had the pleasure to speak with is a gentleman named Mike Seibert. Mike has his own show, Mike Seibert Radio. And I listened to a few episodes and I felt like I had found a kindred spirit. The guy is fantastic. He not only has a great show that really keeps things moving, that interviews a whole lot of really great people, but one of his go-tos when it comes to pop culture is Transformers in all the various forms that it is, no pun intended. And it was a real thrill to be able to talk to a fellow fan who was really dialed into this movie and is just as excited for this upcoming 5-part miniseries as I am for Excelsior Journeys. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, you are going to hear my conversation with Mike Seibert. He was generous enough to have me on his show. We had so much fun. I am really looking forward to you hearing it because the main thing that you're going to hear from is you're going to hear the answer of why this movie at this time with the 35th anniversary, what is it about this movie that inspires me so much, that makes it so near and dear to my heart that I have a framed poster as the centerpiece in my office at home. You're going to hear that, and you're going to hear a whole lot more. But first, a quick word from Main's Playing Cards. We'll be right back. This episode of Excelsior Journeys is brought to you by Main's Playing Cards. This launch deck is limited to 2,500, so check them out today before they are gone. Main's Playing Cards is proudly based out of St. Louis and was started in 2020 during some of the world's more challenging days. To the creators, Andrew and Greg, this company became something positive to hold on to. And 1 year later, Maine's Playing Cards is very grateful for all of the support that they've received from so many, and that they can call this creative outlet a job. You can check them out at mainsplayingcards.com. I will post a link in the show notes, and be sure to get one of their limited launch decks.
Hey, welcome back to Mike Seibert Radio. I am your host, and by George, he's got it. My guest today is George Sirois. He's a author, voice actor, audiobook narrator. He is the host of the Excelsior Journeys podcast and author of books in the same series. And today we are going to talk about a little movie that is having a 35th anniversary. In fact, George is going to discuss with us how the narrative, the takeover, if you will, of his put in the month of August will be primarily focused on that little movie from 1986 with the transforming robots. Of course, we are talking about The Transformers, the movie from 1986. Oh, yeah. This is going to be a whole lot of fun. I'm really excited for this conversation, but please welcome to Mike Seibert Radio, George Sirois. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic, Mike. Thank you so much for having me here.
All right, so let's, I guess let's start with the basics. You know, every podcast is somebody's first podcast, and I already started with a bit of info dumping. You're multi-talented, you're prolific. Let's kind of parse out who George Sirois is and what you do, and then let's kind of get into some of the cool things that you've got going on, because before we tell folks to check out all of your stuff in August for the Transformers the movie stuff, I think it would help as good context for folks to know where you were, to know where we're going.
Absolutely. And there are times when I'm still trying to figure out who the hell George Sirois is. But I think when you take the writing, the podcasting, the audiobook narrating, the voice acting, like it all, you want to condense it all into one thing, I would say storyteller. And whether it's my story that I'm telling or someone else's story or giving someone the spotlight to let them tell their story, that's pretty much what this whole crazy trip has been. You are correct when you say that I have 3 books out there right now, although technically you can say 7 books because one of them is a 5-part serial that's condensed into 1 book, but that's its own thing. That's a sci-fi sports serial that's called From Parts Unknown, and that's available on paperback and ebook. But the big ones that are connected to the podcast are Excelsior and Ever Upward, Part 2 in the Excelsior Journey. That's a YA sci-fi trilogy that I have going. Part 3 is in production, and I swear to you, publisher, Jeff at A-Loris Publishing, it is in production. I will get it to you, and I am working on it very, very diligently. And at some point, it will be finished, and that trilogy will be complete, and I'll be able to move on to my next big project. But yeah, it was that series that inspired the title of the podcast, because when in 2016, I started up with a different podcast. It was this really great roundtable discussion of all these different authors in the St. Louis area. And I was really enjoying being a part of a podcast. Then it got to a point where in 2018, I was starting to get the bug of just like, I got to do this. But just looking through my Facebook friends and seeing all these wonderful creative people that I've known in various walks of life, and just thinking like, wow, these guys need to get themselves out there. These people need to know what it is that they're doing, because what they're doing is fabulous. And then after a few months, it was, okay, they need to be on my podcast. So then I had that sort of direction to go in. And then one of my friends, David Lucas, who was running the Right Pack Radio roundtable show that I was a part of, he was listening to me talk about what I was going to call this show. And he looks over my shoulder and he sees my big banner that I have of Excelsior. And he sees the subtitle on there saying Part 1 in the Excelsior Journey. And he points to it and just goes, why not the Excelsior Journey? And I turned around and I looked at it. I was like, you know what, that works. But let's tweak it. Let's call it Excelsior Journeys, since there's more than one. Everyone has their own. And just a few months later, that's when, in October of 2018, that's when my first 3 episodes launched.
Very cool. That's awesome, because like I was doing a little bit of research, and yeah, I've listened to a handful of episodes, but the one thing I that struck me immediately is that I like that you've got consistent branding. So you know what I mean? It's like, Excelsior Journeys. Oh, it's books, it's podcasts, it's both. Yep. It's it's very consistent, and not all of us content creators think that far ahead. The reason why my podcast is called Mike Seibert Radio is because I wasn't creative enough to come up with a title other than Mike Seibert Radio, because that's really what the show is. It's just things from my perspective, my point of view, my take on things, my friends' interests, my creative friends' interests in creative projects and trying to promote them. So it's all just very much through this kaleidoscope of Mike Seibert, so hence Mike Seibert Radio. But like I said, George, I like that you've got that consistency from jump. And talking about your podcast, I don't know if this is weirdly narcissistic or at least selfish. I've been told by many folks many times that it's not all about me, and I'm like, you seem to forget what the name of my show is. But I was struck immediately by the variety of content in your podcast, and it reminds me of the content that I do. It seems that you're drawn by folks' individual journeys. You have a variety of interviews with a lot of cool folks that we'll call out here in a little bit, but you're also doing chapter reads of your book. So it's not necessarily one particular thing, which is at times difficult to explain to folks. I know I have that challenge. They'll be like, well, what is your podcast about? And I'll say, well, it's like I just said a moment ago, it's just kind of like things through my kaleidoscope and my perspective. Yeah. Whereas with Excelsior Journeys, it feels like you've done a lot of the same thing, but more focused and even themed, because like even as you're explaining it to me now, it feels like even if you're doing a interview with, say, Michael Bell, a voice actor, in your most current episode, we all have those Excelsior Journeys, which I think is really, really cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the chapter readings, they're an example of necessity being the mother of invention. I am on track right now to reach episode 100 on the episode that's going to air on August 10th, which is going to be recorded on August 8th, and which just so happens to be the exact 35th anniversary of Transformers the movie being released. So that when I did the math and realized where everything fell, I was just like, well, that's perfect. So I didn't want to mess with that. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a guest lined up, but our communication wasn't quite there. We couldn't quite get our schedules to mix. And I'm just like, well, no harm, no foul. I definitely want this guy on my show. And if it's not going to happen now, it'll happen in the future. But what am I going to record for this week? Because I can't just say no show this week, and then because that's just going to bump everything down. So it was like, well, why don't I just put in a little bit of my Excelsior audiobook, just chapter 1. Chapter 1 is really strong. Let's go ahead and just put that out there as like a little free tidbit for everyone, because you can go ahead and get the full audiobook if you like. It's available on Amazon. But at the same time, I didn't want to drop any chapters from the audiobook of Ever Upward, since that first chapter almost completely spoils the first book. So I don't want to do that. But at least I can, but at least since I also have From Parts Unknown in my arsenal, I can always go ahead and do a chapter from that as well, which is likely what I'm going to wind up doing this month, because as July is a time when everyone is just kind of scattered. So it's very difficult to really kind of get everyone together for the same weekend and do all the recording. So I think that's what's going to wind up happening is I'm going to wind up doing going to wind up reading a chapter from that, either that or chapter 2 of Excelsior, just as another free tidbit. But that's basically where the chapter readings come from. The main things, the main crux of the show is putting the spotlight on people that are up and coming in their own creative field. When it comes to working with, say, like Michael Bell or some of the other names that are going to be dropped, likely during this show, they're all the people that inspired me. So hopefully, like what all my previous guests that are out there that are up and coming in their field, what they're doing is inspiring others. And what I get to do with this show, because it's my show, I get to talk with all the people that inspired me. So that made me into this, crazy mix of various things that I am. And so I'm basically just telling them, you're either getting the credit or the blame. It depends on who's listening.
I love that. That's fantastic. And so while we're here and we are kind of in this under this umbrella of going to be talking about Transformers the movie, you've recently had interviews with several folks that have been instrumental in that movie. Some of the folks I've chatted with as well. But yeah, talk about some of the folks that you've talked to and maybe some of your experiences chatting with them, because I'm interested to compare notes to see if our experiences with Flint Dilley are similar.
Well, Flint. First of all, I got to just say, Flint is magnificent. He is a prince of a human being. Just for even taking the time to come on this show, come on your show, spread the word about who he is, what he's done, because too many people just don't know. Flint was one of those people that I reached out to on Facebook as on a whim, just thinking that, at least he'll know that, there's someone out there who knows who he is, who admires him and everything, and would like to connect via Facebook. And he did. And he accepted me. And for a while there, we would chat in just a little bit here and there, not too much, but just a little bit. And one time last year was when I got the 27x40 poster of Transformers the movie. And I got that from Amazon and got it framed, put it up on my wall in my office, right here at home. And I basically just kind of made that like the centerpiece of the whole room. It's what ties it all together. And I snapped a picture of it, put it online, and put out there just basically saying, thank you to all different people that have decided to become Facebook friends with me, and, just kind of tag them and thank them for this. And I also put in there the 3 quotes that open up the first Excelsior book. As one is from the book of Matthew, which the last part of it saying, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The second is from Thomas Mallory's Lamort to Arthur, where it talks about what is written on the stone with Excalibur. And then the third part is, one day an Autobot shall rise from our ranks and use the power of the Matrix to light our darkest hour. Optimus Prime. And so now when I put that on there, I posted both photos there at once. And Flint dropped a little story about that quote that I never knew about, that it was inspired by Churchill and his whole darkest hour speech. And, when you hear it, it's just like, well, of course. But, when you're growing up and everything, you just know of that quote. Hearing that Flint was directly inspired by that, it was a great drop. And I was just like, I got to do this. So first of all, I asked him if I could gift him copies of both Excelsior and Ever Upward. And he said that would be great. He sent me his address. I signed 2 copies. I sent them over to him, and he got them and he started reading them. And from what I understand, he's been enjoying them. And so fabulous. But it was right after we did that, that's when I said, by the way, I have this show. You have your book that's coming out. Would you like to, can I have you come on and we can talk about the book? We can talk about your whole career. We can talk about the movie, etc. And he was all for it. And we talked for a good 2 hours. And it was one of those situations where we just could have kept on talking. But at the same time, it was just, everything that he was saying was gold. And even better, I just ran the episode through Descript, and it took out all the ums and uhs, and it actually shortened it by about 20 minutes. So, so I am going to be, reposting that episode just as like a nice, cleaner version of it. So it's not as stuttery throughout, but I am just so absolutely proud of that. And it was during that episode, that's when the idea really kind of came to me about doing a month-long celebration of the movie. And he was all for it. So I was able to basically like propose it to him right there. Why don't you come back and we can talk about just the movie, about the development of it. And he was like, yeah, let's do this. So he's set for coming on. I reached out to Ron Friedman if our schedules can work. He's going to be coming on. I spoke to Neil Ross when he was a guest on the show.
Yeah.
And that was a great episode, too. That was over an hour and a half that we were talking. And Neil was, again, just a magnificent. It was a terrific time. He's got like a very kind of a dry delivery that works for him. But at the same time, it's just like, that, like everything he's saying, it's all very genuine. The man is very appreciative of his fan base, and we love him for it. So, and just the fact that not prompted by me. This is the big thing. I did not ask him to do this. I just happened to bring up the fact that he had one of the immortal lines in the whole movie. And he said, yeah, a lot of audiences really enjoyed that when the moment when I was in watching the movie and that line came out, and then he jumped into, I got better things to do tonight than die. It was just like, I got it.
Yeah.
It was that moment. It was like, you ever seen the movie The Paper with Michael Keaton?
Yeah.
Okay. That moment right near the end where he's been like trying to get that quote from the cop saying they didn't do it. It was that moment where as soon as he said that, he just gives like this wonderful like sigh of relief and just like, yes, that's exactly how I felt when Neil said that line. So it was awesome. It was so cool. And I was thrilled by it. And he had so many great stories too, because it's not just about Transformers, but he's the voice of Shipwreck from G.I. Joe. So of course I'm going to bring up There's No Place Like Springfield. And which is still, you can put that in a time capsule. That is one of the finest episodes you've ever written, that's ever been written for an animated show. Just absolutely. It is a fabulous episode. And it's something that I would definitely love to just kind of, revisit. I have the DVDs. Why not? But yeah, it was fabulous. My only regret is that I blanked on Steve Gerber's name when we were talking about who wrote it.
Yeah.
That was my one regret. I was just like, and then when I look back and I saw that Steve wrote it, I was like, well, of course Steve wrote it. So
It has that sardonic wit from Steve Gerber for sure.
Yeah.
And not a lot of folks know that Steve Gerber actually wrote a lot of animation. It's very interesting. It's like, wait a sec, the guy that created Howard the Duck did a lot of cartoons, and
one of them just happened to feature a kid holding a bazooka. Yes.
Yes.
Try to get away with that now.
Yeah, he had just a strangely unique mind.
Yeah.
Just a very surreal outlook on life, and that permeated his work quite a bit. That's a voice that's definitely greatly missed. For sure,
and Flint and I were talking about Steve because I recently re-listened to the episode with Flint because I wanted to hear how it sounded after I ran it through Descript and got rid of the ums and uhs. And it did sound a lot cleaner. It sounded, like you can hear just like a little bit of a stutter like every now and then, but I took out all the pauses as well. So it flows a lot better. And it was a really good listen. And it was that part of it where we got to There's No Place Like Springfield, where Flint was saying that was one of the rare instances where he got to edit Steve. And so he was also a part of one of the greatest episodes ever made of animated television. So just the fact that, I could go on for several shows just about that episode.
Yeah.
That's how good it is. That's how good that was. So, but yeah. And then it was not too long after that. That's when I reached out to Vince DiCola's manager, and we were able to set up. We originally had one period set up, then unfortunately Vince got COVID. And that put him out of commission for a while. But when he was recovered, I've been keeping in touch with his manager, Peter. And he and I become very friendly. And I repaid the favor by having him on my show the very next week. So he got to talk about getting into music management. And that was a really fun episode too, because I got to fanboy with someone who is a full-on fanboy. I got to talk about with someone who knows when you say Vera Saraband, they know what you're talking about, and somebody who actually worked there too. So it was a fun episode, but the one with Vince was fabulous. We only had about an hour to work with, but we wound up getting so much great material because he was talking about, I had no idea that he had written Far From Over, or co-written it with Frank Stallone. But But that was a huge part of it. And that led to his getting involved with Stallone, which led to Rocky IV. And so we had it was like, I would say like about, like a quarter of it was about him getting started in music. Another quarter was about staying alive. And then half of it was about Rocky IV. And it got to a point where we were getting really close to the end of the hour. And it was just like, well, we're not going to go like, oh, and he did Transformers the movie too. All right,
By the way,
right?
Just like as an afterthought.
Exactly. So I invited him to come back, and then I told him about what I had in mind for August, and he was like, well, let's do that. So I was like, yes. So now I know what part 3 of the whole thing is going to be all about. Part 1 is going to be about the development with Flint, and if the schedule gods are willing, Ron Friedman will be on there as well. Part 2 will be about the voices. So I'm going to have, Neil is coming back. I also was able to get Susan Blue, RC. I got Greg. Nice. I got Greg Berger, Grimlock. I have Michael Bell coming back. And I just got, I am so excited for this.
Breaking news.
I got Victor Caroli.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Because he doesn't do a whole lot of press. He doesn't talk to a whole lot of folks.
Yeah.
In fact, 2020 in February, there was going to be a TFCon in Orlando, and he lives down that way. And so that was a big in because I saw that he lives in Naples, which is where my father lives. So it was just like, very cool.
There you go.
So, and that was to have been his first convention appearance, because apparently he hasn't done BotCons or any of that other stuff. And then, obviously, because of the Rona, the show gets canceled. Yeah. And so he still technically has not made a convention appearance. So that's a heck of a get. That's going to make for a really cool, enjoyable episode. You've got a stacked lineup coming up.
And the really fun thing is that for the voices part of it, it's going to be a panel. They're all going to be on there together. And so that's going to be just a real blast, because even though the movie itself did not have the same sort of feel as the show where they had all the actors in the booth at the same time, because that was something that Michael Bell talked about, something that Neil Ross talked about in the previous interviews, was that the setup was very different. They were even, different studio completely. Thankfully, Wally Burr was working with them the whole time, but still it was not the same camaraderie in the sense of the sense of everyone kind of playing off of each other. But what it wound up doing was even though that movie and everything didn't have that sort of feel, I get to kind of recreate the feel of what they're used to, of doing it for the regular show. So, and even just having Victor in there is just, I consider that a huge blessing, just the fact that he said yes. And because what Victor gets to talk about that I'm really excited about is the different types of narration that they had, because there was the opening all he had was the opening narration for the movie, but he had also had different drops here and there for the show, but he also had an intro and an outro for the overseas release of the movie, where they did this whole Star Wars scroll type of thing, basically setting everything up. And then at the very end, spoiler alert, they got to say that, like Optimus Prime is going to return. Just like, kids, you can dry your eyes now. It's okay. He's going to come back.
Yeah. We're not going to traumatize you the way we did all those poor Americans.
Right.
It's like we heard about the American child who locked themselves up in a bathroom for 3 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah.
we just want to make sure that doesn't happen in UK and overseas in the other territories. And it is interesting, that narration, because it's weird watching the UK version, and it's like you said, it doesn't, it doesn't have the song. It kind of like ducks it. It doesn't have like the Superman style opening credits. Instead, it has the Star Wars like crawl, which is fine. You could still hear the song under it, but then, like you said, Victor Crowley comes in and basically reads the scroll. So it's weird to have scrolling text and the narration. It's like split the difference or something, and it still has, it is the year 2005, so it picks up with that. It's very weirdly disjointed,
which is really funny, because like the last line, it says, but the Autobots led by Optimus Prime are not so easily defeated. A few seconds later, it is the treacherous Decepticons have conquered the Autobots' home planet Cybertron, so he was defeated.
It's so weird.
It's like the Simpsons Behind the Laughter episode. Just like, the dream was over. Coming up, was the dream really over? Yes, it was.
Or even that bit in the Simpsons movie where they're like, "To be continued immediately," because it's a movie. It's like,
or even better, the and like not and not even to harp on Victor or anything. Like, the man had a job to do. The man did it, like with splendor, and I am so looking forward to talking to him about this as well. But I'm really curious to get his reaction from when he read the text. But is this really the end of Optimus Prime? Find out in tomorrow's exciting adventure, The Return of Optimus Prime. It's like, spoiler alert.
Yeah. So funny. Well, and it's interesting, the differences in different audiences and how they got to experience that, because when I saw the movie, when you saw the movie, folks of our generation and age saw the movie, that was it. It's just like, Optimus Prime is gone. These are the new characters. This is the new status quo. Let's go into season 3. In fact, I've corresponded and met with so many friends that just jumped into season 3 face first and had no idea what the heck was going on. It's like, where's Optimus Prime? They hadn't seen the movie. It was so weird, because like the movie came and went so quickly, wasn't a success at all, and so there were a lot of folks that were really kind of left in the cold. I guested on a podcast, Transformers University, where they were talking about the return of Optimus Prime, and I had forgotten, in doing research for my part of that episode, that the Return of Optimus Prime came out on video at the same time as Transformers the movie, and that wasn't until January of 1987. I had completely forgotten about that. It's like it.
And they advertised the VHS as the sequel to Transformers the movie, and I was like, no. 5 Faces of Darkness, that is the sequel. That's you guys gotta go back a little bit. You guys really got to see what was happening while you were away, because quite a bit happened.
So that being said, before we get too deep in the weeds, because I think folks that are listening to this know Transformers the movie already. So I don't necessarily need to backpedal that far, but what I'm really interested in discussing with you is really why Transformers the movie. Why that's why you're celebrating the 35th anniversary. Why is it taking over the narrative of your podcast and output for August, for that 35th anniversary? Obviously, those of us that like it have, a great degree of affection for it. But what I thought we would kind of discuss is kind of more deeper root causes. It's like, after 35 years, why is this movie so vital to you, so much so that it takes over your narrative output for the 35th anniversary for August?
Excellent question. And for me, it really kind of goes back to the original line, the actual characters, the show, really. This whole wonderful assortment of Transformers, it's a big part of me because I believe it's the first franchise that I discovered. Because there have been other shows and everything. There was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe came before this. G.I. Joe had come before this, but at the same time, my father had a G.I. Joe action figure and everything from way back. And he took the family out to see the original Star Wars. He took us to see Superman and everything. These were all established characters that had been around for quite a while. And during that time and everything, it was someone else who really kind of brought me into that particular fandom. With Transformers, that I discovered on my own. I just happened to be watching a commercial for these toys, and I just something about them grabbed me. And it was just I need to pay attention to this. And then the 3-part miniseries, More Than Meets the Eye, came out. And then the comic book started. And I was just there's something going on here. And so the first issue that I remember the first issue that I got of Transformers was issue number 5, which has the best cover art in the whole Marvel run. And if you don't know it, it's the one with Shockwave standing by a wall and where it says the Transformers, and he writes, are all dead. I mean, come on, that's issue number 5. That's the first one past the 4-issue limited series. And that's how you start. This is something special. And then they just happened to they were airing season 1 during the time on Sunday mornings on WPIX 11 in Poughkeepsie, New York. And that was when we're at church. So my father, went ahead and set up the VCR so that way it would record while we were at church. I came home and the first one I got to watch was SOS Dinobots. And then the very next week, for some reason, they aired them out of order, but they aired the More Than Meets the Eye miniseries. So I got to really get steeped into that. And it was just at one episode after another, it was just getting it more and more and more. It's there's something here, there's something here, there's something here. And then they switched over to Monday through Friday right after school. And that's when things really blew up. That's when I have my other friends and everything talking about it. We're showing off our Transformers. First one I got was the red variant Bumblebee. I didn't know, but then I got a family member sends me Ironhide, and then over at I think it was Kmart. I think that's when I got Soundwave, and then eventually Skywarp, and so I didn't have that many, but the ones that I had I loved, and it was just something about that. It was just constantly just feeding it, and then more reading the issues more and getting more in tune with that, and then around April or so of '86, that's when I started seeing the little teaser right at the end of the Transformers episodes saying, and coming this summer, Transformers the movie. And that really just got me excited, especially at the very end of the commercial when they would say rated PG. Because at that point, GoBot's Battle of the Rock Lords had already come and gone, and that was rated G. And I got to watch that, a few months later and everything. I was just all right, it is what it is. There are no stakes at all, but but at the same time, they're saying the final battle between Optimus Prime and Megatron, and another narrator that comes in to say does Prime die? I was okay, I guess he's gonna die. So,
yeah, as he's showing being shot in the face multiple times.
Exactly.
I mean, that imagery is already upsetting enough, and it's just those TV spots were just bonkers. How they crammed so much into 30 seconds. It's and it's the final battle between Optimus Prime and Megatron. Does Prime die, and who will lead the Autobots? And what is the secret of the monster planet? And I'm oh my God!
I must see this now.
It's too much. It was just overwhelming.
But man, it was great. But yeah, I mean, it just hit every. I was telling my father about this recently because like he was basically just asking the same thing. It was like he was asking me about like what it was like about all of this that really got me interested. And as I'm talking to him about it, I was just like, I've never really spoken to him in this perspective before. I didn't tell him about how it started with as toys because of the Diaclone and Microchange lines over in Japan. Like I didn't talk to him, like with able to regurgitate all that info from the toys that made us, but it was just great. It was fun, getting to kind of fill him in about that. And also just kind of reminding him that on the day that it came out, my uncle called up my father and he said, whatever you do, don't take George to go see Transformers the movie. I'm going to take him to it. And I didn't know that, like until I got home and I asked him, like, can we go see it? And then he said like, well, I just got this call from Uncle Bob, and like he wants to take you to go see it. And I was like, all right. And just kind of like, it was August. I didn't have to worry about spoilers from students or anything like that. It was just like, I'll just stay in my little bubble until we go see it. And then it turns out like a couple weeks later, we were talking a little bit about it and I was talking to my aunt at the time and saying how the different movies that I'd seen so far at that at that time, because I mean summer of '86 it was huge,
stacked.
And it was just like one thing on top of the other. No wonder Transformers the movie didn't last in theaters. It never got a chance. Right. it was just swallowed up by so much that was going out there.
Between like Top Gun and Aliens and Karate Kid Part 2,
The Fly,
everything.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah,
and that was a time when like movies stayed in theaters for 12 to 14 weeks. It's just crazy. You just don't see that now.
Yeah. So, and then I was saying how like, but the one I'm really looking forward to seeing is Transformers the movie. And my uncle just comes over. He's just like, "You ready to go?" He's like, "We're going now?" And it's like, "Yeah." It's like, "All right, let's do this." So we're in the car. We're driving over to the theater, which is not far away, and he's asking me. It's just like, So fill me in on this. What's what's the whole thing all about? And I lay out the whole thing. I'm shocked that I didn't go into the Victor Crowley voice and just just didn't say like many millions of years ago on the planet Cybertron life existed, but not life as we know it today. Just basically I just broke it down to him like really succinctly, and I'm really glad I did because they really kind of drop you right into the middle of it all, don't they?
Yeah. Well, and you have the time jump too, and it's just like it's just you're really thrown in the deep end right away.
Yeah, and like it was everything about that movie from start to finish was just ballsy. Like that. It's every single thing that they would do, they would not try today. They just wouldn't. They would not, they would not kill off beloved characters and keep them dead. There's so much that they would not do. There was a lot of violence that's in this. And from what I heard, like there were some parents that were getting really upset and taking their kids out from the attack on the shuttle at the very beginning. Yeah. I mean, granted, Prowl's death, my God, just like
still even now, I mean, just grisly and gruesome. And I would imagine that, had the same parents that had taken their kids to go see the Rock Lords the year before, that it's like, what is this?
This ain't
Grab your
robots.
Stuff. We're leaving. We're leaving. We're leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. It would have been, I mean, it's, yeah, there's a lot of carnage, and I mean, and characters that we have known for years dying off screen, just like RC pulling Windcharger's dead corpse, like out of the line of fire, and then there's Wheeljack's body right next to it. I mean, like, I just go on and on about. There's so much that they did with this that they just would not do now. They would look at Transformers the movie as what not to do, but at the same time, every single thing that they did is a reason why that movie endures today.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say, and that's the way I talk about it with folks that ask me those same questions. It's like, why are you so hung up on this movie? Why do you like this movie so much? What is it that keeps you buying home video versions of it that you already have over a half?
Yeah.
I have more copies of Transformers the movie than I have Star Wars.
Yeah.
And
I can believe it. Yep.
George Lucas and 20th Century Fox put out a lot of copies of Star Wars.
They sure did. And that was before he was tinkering with them too. So.
Exactly. And I think I still have more copies of Transformers the movie than I do those. And that's what it is. It's the longevity of it. It's the audacity, the sheer audacity of the project that gives it that longevity. I was just recently on a podcast with some friends talking about Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh yeah.
And that was also a box office failure. It was a huge bomb.
Yeah.
Precisely, and it was because it was too far ahead of its time. Current audiences didn't know what to do with it, and I think that's the same thing that happened with Transformers the movie, is that it was so dark, it was so violent, it was so transgressive, and oftentimes incredibly weird. And there's all these bizarre tonal shifts, and the art style and the music and all of it makes it so far ahead of its time. But it's one of those things where we look back on it now and we can talk about it and invest hours upon hours of podcasts and video podcasts and
absolutely
and conversations about it, because there's so much depth to it. And honestly, you don't see anything else from that era, or at least like as a singular piece of media, to get that much reverence and attention. Like, I mean, I don't even know if a high definition transfer of G.I. Joe the movie exists. I know it's on Blu-ray, but I think it's a scan from a DVD or something like that.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And so it just doesn't get that same level of appreciation. I mean, to say nothing about other animated fare of the time, like the My Little Pony movie or the Care Bears movies, Rainbow Bright. And I think a lot of that was directly affected by the failure of Transformers the movie. There was gonna be a Gem movie, and that was torpedoed, and that got shelved. And then obviously G.I. Joe the movie was massively reworked. It's still a bizarre bit of kismet that G.I. Joe the movie was actually supposed to come out first, but they ran into production delays, and they're like, oh, well, you know what, let's just put this Transformer out first and see how it does. Well, then they saw how it did, and suddenly Duke slipped into a coma.
I was telling Michael Bell about that too. Like, it was just like my 11-year-old mind. As soon as I hear like Scarlett say, like he's gone into a coma, I was like, again?
Right.
The man's gone into so many comas, like
so many comas. He's got real bad CTE.
Yeah, I was thinking like that if they want to do any sort of like retconning of the G.I. Joe movies after Retaliation, they should have had they should bring back Channing Tatum as Duke and just say like, nah, he's just been in a coma. Like he was discovered he was recovered by like another faction of the Joes led by Ripcord. So that way Marlon Wayans can come into it and get him on, get him on there and get him out. So there was always that option, just wanted to throw that out there to
absolutely
to Hasbro Studios and everything. I'm just like, you know what, you don't have to, you don't have to start from ground zero or anything with this. You can always just kind of like pick back up and read it. Because, I mean, Retaliation itself, just to go off on a slight tangent, that was definitely, it was not a direct sequel to The Rise of Cobra, but it was enough of one. There's definitely like the whole thing with the president, the whole thing with Cobra Commander and Destro, being behind bars and everything. There was so much that went into that, but at the same time, there was so much that was reinvented that I was really taken. I had a blast with Retaliation. I know with a lot of Joe fans, I'm kind of in the minority of that, but I had so much fun with Retaliation. I felt that captured almost everything that I remembered growing up and loving with G.I. Joe.
Yeah, I thought that they threaded the needle as best as they could. I don't dislike that movie, and I remember having fun with it in the theater, and I remember thinking where it's like they're trying to cross the streams between Sunbow and Marvel as best as they can. You know, I mean, you've got a heavy lean on the ninja stuff, but you've also got the tactical military action, and yeah, again, I think they did the best they could with what they had. So since we're in a Joe tangent, let me get your hot take on this Snake Eyes stuff. How are you feeling about that going into it?
I need to take a look at the trailer. Actually, I have not seen the trailer yet. I'm interested in knowing who is behind the scenes. I feel like that's a big factor. I'm fine with the fact that, you know, like that they want to go in that direction with an origin story and focus on someone who doesn't talk. I think that's a really interesting risk, and I hope that like I said, I haven't seen any trailers or anything. I know that a lot of the hardcore fans are really turned off by the fact that he's not blonde hair, you know, like a blonde-haired American, and I get it. I definitely get it, you know, but at the same time, it's just like, you know, from what I remember, the flashbacks that they showed in Rise of Cobra, I don't think that kid had blonde hair. So
right.
I think that's what they're going through. That's what they're going by. And if they were able to get that through, then I think they were just like, all right, let's just focus on that part of it. Because I think they feel like when it comes to like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, that's the part that both movies really got right. And especially with Retaliation, I thought that was they were fabulous together. Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it. It's one of those things where just like I hope you guys know what you're doing. I just hope you know what you're doing. I hope this is fun. I hope it works. I want it to work. I want, you know, like I am a fan of these properties. I want them to work. You know, like I can look at, you know, just getting back to Transformers. I saw the last night. It did not work, you know, and and I just remember like just wanting to like that one, and it just wouldn't let me, and because it was just coming up with like. I was excited at the end of Age of Extinction. I really enjoyed that one. I feel like if you take away, you take away the whole Chicago escape sequence, and you take the whole lift things up and put them down part in Hong Kong, and you have like a much tighter movie than what's out there right now, and I think it would have satisfied like all quadrants. So it got me really excited right at the very end. And knowing where it was, you know, feeling like, okay, we're going to go in a really cool direction here. Now we're going to go over to King Arthur. Why? And we're gonna bring in other Decepticons like Suicide Squad members. Why? It's like we don't know. We're just it was just like it feels like it was written by committee because it was. You know, like it's you know. It was literally. It was that whole roundtable that they did. You know, like I would have loved to have been in there. You know, like at the same time, it was just like I already have an idea that I've even been like kind of fleshing out a little bit more that can carry on after the last night, and it can also incorporate the Bumblebee timeline that it looks like they're working with, and give it its own Transformers: Days of Future Past kind of feel to it.
There you go.
Yeah, I feel like that needs to be done to successfully like wrap up the Bay movies and move on in this whole other timeline. Because I feel like if they just go like, oh, we're just doing these now, these don't matter anymore. I feel that's dangerous. I feel like they did it really, really well with the X-Men movies, and you know, like you take out the X-Men Origins Wolverine, and you got like a really solid continuity going there. So again, you know, just kind of like, you know, touching up on just going off on one tangent after another.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely, and this is it. Like this is the sort of stuff that I grew up on, and it's the sort of thing that inspires creativity in a lot of people, including me. And I feel like that is something that I feel needs to be celebrated. Which is what comes right back down to why August is going to be the month of celebrating Transformers the movie, because I feel it needs to be celebrated.
Absolutely. Now, I want to take a step back from our deep tangents for a sec. I would like to go back to your original watching of the movie with your uncle. What was the reaction when the house lights come up? I'm very curious about this one.
I was actually like excited for the future. I was actually really into it. I feel like when Brawn, Prowl, Ironhide, and Ratchet met their end, especially Ironhide, the such heroic nonsense moment. That's again, they would not dare to do that today. They cannot say like, "Hey, look at all these great toys that you got. We're gonna throw them out, and we're gonna sell you a whole bunch of new ones." It's not like we're gonna, introduce some new toys to put on top of the toys you got. No, we're going to run your toys through a combine, and then then it's like, oh, you can't play with this one anymore. Oh, what a shame. Try Ultra Magnus.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was into it. I was like, wow, we're taking some serious steps here. Like this is there are stakes here. I'm interested, let's see where this goes. And then as it was going on more and more, it was just like, this is good. This is really good. And then the death of Optimus Prime scene, which, as I said with my conversation with Flint, that was perfection. The way that whole scene carried out. Everyone was on their A game, and Nelson Shin, God bless him, he was the stuff that he brought in, the eyes, getting bright, lighting up and then fading,
the flickering,
and then turning to gray, and then his head just dropping to one side, and Daniel just like crying there. It was just like they had to have known that this was not just a toy commercial. They had to know what they can say, like, oh, we had a job, and that was to phase out the 84 line and bring in the 86 line. Okay, but the way you did it, it proves to me you know exactly what these characters are all about. And you did not just like put all of them onto one big ship and then send them out and blow it up. That would have been cynical. That would have been incredibly cynical. Just saying how like, just grabbing the arc and everything, like getting it working again, getting all the Autobots in there and everything. And then all of a sudden just something like, oh, there goes into the sun. And then we have a whole new adventure with all these new characters. That would have been incredibly cynical. The way that they did it, it just proves that they were aware that these characters meant something. And they did a magnificent job illustrating that with that scene. And like I said, Nelson was on top of his game. All the voice acting work. Peter Cullen, I mean, you can't say enough about Peter Cullen. The man was just like, the man is still just absolute genius. And it's someone that's my big get. If there's any opportunity to have Peter Cullen and Frank Welker, like in there, of course, the two that don't do as much social media or anything or are really difficult to pin down. Of course, they're the ones that that everyone wants to talk to, which is likely why they avoid social media like that. But his acting was phenomenal, and Robert Stack was great, and then Vince DiCola's music. I mean, like it got you in such a great way. So it was big. It was that whole sequence was just fabulous. I just remember really being taken by that. Got choked up a little bit just because like Optimus Prime is always someone that I hold it in high regards and always will. But what really interested me was afterwards when Megatron met Unicron. And it was that whole scene. It was just like, what? Okay, now the plot's getting, kicking into gear now. Now we have some brand new Decepticons, but they're reconfigured versions of the old ones. So they're not replacements. They're the next step in their evolution. And so that's really cool. Like, and getting rid of Starscream the way he did, it was just like, this is great stuff. This is so much great stuff. And then of course Spike dropping, oh shit, what are we gonna do now? Like,
Well, and I was going to ask you about that too. So, like, we talked about, kind of the violence, but you had, mentioned that you would go to church on Sundays, and I was wondering what the family's response to the profanity, and because I know folks that like have had issues with the violence, but I've heard that folks had even more issue with the profanity, which is obviously what got it that PG rating. They intended for that so that it would play later in the day. There would be more showings, and
it was
even
smart.
that part of it's smart. Yeah. Kind of backfired, but also very, very smart.
Oh yeah, you can tell that at the very core of this, there is a marketing agency that's pulling the strings, and Griffin Bacall, those guys had done some amazing work with this. They had brought in the right kind of people involved as well, and so that idea of just dropping that S-bomb and giving an Ultra Magnus a damn it line later on. Also noting that they took out the oh shit line from the initial video, the initial video release, and the one that they did that Rhino did years later. They didn't drop in the S-bomb until its first release on DVD that Rhino did, the almost bare bones version of it. But I was just like, as this 10-year-old me and everything to come just,
right?
Like
I mean, it makes it feel very adult, especially coming from that character. Yeah. Because Spike is the character that you identify with when you're watching the shows on Saturday morning and weekday afternoons in 1984 and 1985. Now you have this time jump, and this character that you were along with, the identification character, is now an adult, which is kind of cool. You get, oh, cool, I'm looking up to this character now, and then he starts swearing. It's like, Spike is pretty cool. He's a cool dude.
And what's really cool about that is that what they did with Spike later on, I thought was fabulous. The way that character kept on going, and especially even though I'm not like the biggest fan of the Rebirth, the 3-part miniseries that wrapped up the whole thing, that should have been 5 parts, but David Wise, the late great David Wise, had so much to say. Folks, take a look at I think it's called just like David Wise interview on YouTube. It's there. It's about 20 minutes long. He breaks it down of all of the different budget issues and everything that was happening, all the issues that he had with writing the Rebirth. And it's a great interview. It's a really solid interview. But what I love, Spike just really, it's like he came into his own, especially in that miniseries. Like he was stepping forward. He wasn't just like, hey, I want to go too. It was, he was being like, he was being an authority on there. He was, he stood up to Optimus at the very end and said like, told Optimus that he was staying on Nebulos, and just saying like, Prime, he's got my boy. You must trust me. And finally, and Optimus, deferred to him. So he really was like a hell of a character, and somebody that I hope will have someone like that in future Transformers movies.
Absolutely. And with that, with the progression of old characters obviously comes in the new characters as well. You've got Ultra Magnus, you got Cup, Hot Rod, RC, etc. Springer, of course. And all these characters were super cool. Yeah. Except for Wheelie. Wheelie sucks, but that's all right.
Wheelie sucks. Like there was this great moment. I think it was in Ghost in the Machine in season 3 where Spike and Bumblebee got to, ride together. And that was just like, all right, that's good. Let's keep Wheelie over there. Let's get more Spike and Bumblebee. Because they have a good chemistry. They always have had a really good chemistry. And so so that part of it, I feel like that was something they should have, focused on more. It's like, I get, like Daniel with Wheelie, I get that, but let's put more focus on Spike and Bumblebee, because that's a pairing that we knew was going to last from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that the writers kind of miscalculated. It's like you give us both dynamics. It's like you bring in new kid appeal characters in Daniel and Wheelie, where I think that's where kids are supposed to go. But folks like us were starting to grow up and grow out of it. So the time jump works. Aging Spike works. So yeah, why and everybody likes that dynamic of Spike and Bumblebee. Why not stick with that instead of trying to put in the new kid appeal characters, because the fan base had kind of outgrown it. I think that was their big miscalculation, even more so than the crass consumerism of the movie of, killing off all the old characters so that you're motivated to buy the new ones. But yeah, I think they just didn't quite know the audience and didn't trust the audience. I think it's not that they didn't know the audience. I think that they didn't trust the audience, because everything else in season 3 works very well. It's like, you've got you're moving away from Earth. You're going into hard sci-fi. You're dealing with aliens and weird concepts, and all of that stuff springs out of the movie. I think that's why the movie is still so iconic, because there are all of these bonkers concepts that come from the movie that are still called upon in any iteration of Transformers fandom. It's like, if you get a nickel for every time somebody says one shall stand, one shall fall, or, I mean, so much of that dialogue has been repurposed and reused, and that speaks to how iconic of a touchstone this is. I've heard my buddy Anthony Brucali, who hosts Transformers University at tfu.info, he refers to the movie as the centerpiece of, because it really is. Yeah. I mean, and G1 is really kind of like defined as like before the movie and after the movie, but the movie itself is this thing that exists in pop culture.
It's the jewel right in the center.
It really is.
It's the jewel right in the center of it.
Exactly.
And like I was talking a little bit more with Flint about this during our talk. And a couple of years before I got to talk with Flint, I met Greg Berger, and he was at a convention that was wonderfully stacked with a lot of really great pop culture people, but it was horribly marketed, so no one really knew about it. But that was it sucked that it was basically like throwing money away for my table, because I had my books there. But at the same time, it offered a chance to kind of walk around a little bit and chat with some of these people. So that's where I got to gift Greg a copy of Excelsior.
Nice.
And I got to talk with him about it. I showed him the 3 quotes, and he looked at it. I was just like, I'm going to show this to Peter. I was like, awesome. Please do. And this was before I knew that the podcast was going to get going. And I even had a great moment where I got to meet and gift a copy of Excelsior to Alan Oppenheimer, the voice of Skeletor.
Nice.
And which was amazing, because one of the main characters in Excelsior was directly inspired by the Frank Langella version of Skeletor. From the Masters of the Universe movie. And that wouldn't have happened if Alan hadn't made that character as iconic as it is. So it's just like, I got to give him a copy. And Alan was so gracious too, because he got up from his chair and let me sit at his booth, and then stood over me while I signed it, my copy of the book for him. And the whole time I'm thinking, it's just like, where the fuck is a camera? Like, somebody needs to...
Oh, that's
this
great.
needs to go out there. Yeah. But I had a moment, and one of my friends, who's also like real hardcore into Transformers, she asked me, what would I have done differently for season 3? And I said, like, the main thing I would have changed is we go back to Dark Awakening, and Optimus, he still overpowers the programming that the Quintessons gave him, but he doesn't kill himself afterwards. He's still banged up. He's still badly wounded and everything. He needs to be on a life support system. And that is what keeps him on Cybertron and acts as a mentor for Rodimus. Rodimus still has the Matrix, and he's still going out on missions, but he has Optimus's ear. He can go ahead and like use him as a guiding force. And so basically he would be in the same role that General Hawk was in on that same season of G.I. Joe.
Right.
So because they brought in General Hawk that same season. So he'd basically be like the same thing. He would be the top guy that would, like be looked at, like with reverence and everything, but he was not in a position to actually get out on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So Rodimus would do that instead. Then you have, and this is also dependent on Hasbro getting their ideas in gear a little faster than they did, and saying that there would be some sort of, universal catastrophe or something that requires Optimus to actually be there. And so you have maybe like, a human that is working with him, with his life support system to basically like try to improve it as much as possible to the point where that human would actually have to wear it and become it and become the Power Master. So that way you have Power Master Optimus Prime. And then all of a sudden, now you have Optimus, like back and everything in gear as the Power Master that Hasbro puts out. Mm-hmm. So there you're in with him coming back, and not just bringing him back because somehow during all this conflict and a ship blowing up and everything, that a couple of humans just happened to get on there and get a perfectly pristine Optimus out of the ship.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm really bitter about that.
Yeah, it just doesn't line up.
It clashes so badly with the continuity, and it pisses me off. It was just like, if you want to have them rescued, fine. Have everything be what it is, have everything carry out what it is in Dark Awakening, but have Jessica and Gregory pull up in their ship after everything is done. It's just like, what's that thing floating out there?
Right. Well, and it's also kind of weirdly doubly frustrating as well, because like as a singular piece, The Return of Optimus Prime is a pretty decent episode. It's a lot of fun. There's some cool stuff in there, some great concepts, but
the animation is fabulous.
It's great.
The animation looks terrific.
Yeah.
Like it looks the closest thing to the movie that was out there. Like it looked really, really good.
Absolutely.
And of course the Stan Bush cameo at the very end.
Yep.
Like, why not? Like that's the time when you bring out the touch. That's
which again, kind of putting some mild profanity into it. It has the line, "When all hell is breaking loose." I mean, that is in a weekday afternoon cartoon there, and that's like, all right, I like it. And again, it's just touchstones like that. It's like, look at how ubiquitous Stan Bush's music has become because of the movie. And we were talking about this earlier when we were talking about Vince DiCola and his relationship with Stallone. It's interesting the weird connections with Stallone and Transformers, because obviously The Touch was originally written to be in Cobra. That Stallone movie. So it's just so weird, these weird alternate parallels where everything eventually... It's almost 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's like 6 degrees of Transformers, the movie, because between that's how Robert Stack gets Unsolved Mysteries, kind of based upon the strength of that voice work. And it's interesting. And like I said, I mean, for me, what makes Transformers the movie a topic that I still enjoy talking so much about is that it's iconic in a way that's separate from the rest of the franchise. Obviously, Transformers as a concept, as an IP, is part of the pop culture. But the Transformers the movie also has a separate and almost unique place in that, you've got the Marky Mark connection, the Boogie Nights stuff, and who ends up being in the live action movies. Again, all these weird 6 degrees things, but you've got episodes of the Goldbergs, using that, and you've got Dare being used in Netflix's Glow. It's just like all of these reverberations that come out of.
I think they used the touch on Chuck as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great stuff. It's great stuff. And like the way you said that really is something, because the general public knows about Transformers. The fans know about Transformers, the movie, and they know the effect that it had on them. And, if heaven allows, you're able to see that in the theaters more than once before it leaves, it really was like just something really special. You can't really pin down, but it's something that, it really is. It's beyond good. It's beyond evil, beyond our wildest imagination. Like that's what they said, and that's what's there.
Absolutely. And I've told this story in a number of other places as well. I had the opportunity to see it twice in the theaters. And
nice.
And it was on the strength of that commercial. We were talking about the commercials earlier, and one of them was like, it's so big, it's so exciting, you've got to see it twice to take it all in. And I remember talking to my mom, almost quoting that verbatim, and she's like, we'll see. And, within like the next weekend or something like that, grabbed a couple friends and she took us to go see it, which was the second time for me. And it was, so I always remember that very fondly. And that's almost like one of my weird childhood flexes. I'm like, yeah, but I saw it twice. And they're like, lucky. Yeah. It's like, little rich kid over here. And I'm like, well, I went to go see a movie twice. Okay. But you remember those bits of, I guess, predating viral marketing, but it's just like, like you said, the tagline, or like we were talking about the commercials. I mean, there's just so many ubiquitous things that are so unique to this movie that I just, I think the only other date that's more cemented in my mind for when a movie came out was June 23rd, when Batman 89 came out. But outside of that,
which has the greatest teaser poster of all time.
Absolutely.
I'm proud to say that I got that hanging up in my office at work. And that was a big get, getting that one. I always wanted to have that poster, and I always wanted to have it framed, and I got them both. So, yeah.
That's so cool. I love the photos that you've shared of your space there, and just, I mean, let's as we close out, let's talk about the poster too, because like the poster is really in itself a bizarre piece of art, in that like it has, first, the style is kind of weird. Like I'm sure having the poster in the size that you've got it, I'm sure you've stood and looked close to it. Like the expressions on the characters' faces are kind of goofy. It's just a very weird interpretation, but it's also a very striking and iconic image that's been obviously homaged a number of times, like in comic books and things like that. But it is. It's like we should have known what we were in for, because none of the old characters are on the poster. It's Ultra Magnus. It's it's Springer. It's Cup. It's RC. You don't even have Hot Rod. All you have is, spoiler alert, you have Rodimus Prime, way off to the side, who's actually smaller in perspective than Wheelie. It's like, it's just very bizarre. But yet that is an iconic image that's burned into my memory as iconic as that teaser Batman poster, as much as like any number of Star Wars images or Raiders of the Lost Ark, or just that the all-time classics. I always think of that movie, of the poster for Transformers the movie.
Yeah, there's something about that one. I think the thing that grabs me more than anything is the way that the logo looks. I mean, like there's some, it's, it's given that extra like 3D edge to it, and it pops so much more. It was just like, this is not going to be just like an episode, an extended episode.
Right.
This is going to be something different. This is going to be a game changer. And then you look down on the bottom there, PG. Like,
Yeah,
all
of that.
There's something going on here.
Yeah, it's a real movie, and like, it's got like all of the cover dressings and all of that stuff. It's like, DEG presents Dino De Laurentiis, who I didn't know anything about movies, but I knew that name from like seeing that. I'm like, it's a real movie in a way that Rainbow Bright wasn't, or My Little Pony the movie wasn't, or or GoBots. None of that. None of those really felt like movies. And for me, Transformers the movie, even now, is still the meter stick that I use to measure a television to movie transition. Like I remember watching like Star Trek Generations, and I'm like, well, it's fine, but it's no Transformers the movie. It's like, and it's just that confluence of like the time jump, the all of the ambitious choices with regards to the characters. It's everything just felt real and intense and scary and game changing, like you had said. And yeah, I mean, I anything. I mean, like I even remember like I had a cousin of mine who was super into Pokemon, and like I remember that I took him to go see that first Pokemon movie, and I asked him because I didn't know anything about it. I was like, "So is this any different than the show?" He's like, "No, it's just like the show." And I'm like, when you get a little older, I'm going to show you this little movie called The Transformers the Movie, where like that's how you do a
big screen adaptation. Yeah,
and it doesn't even matter that it's like a Saturday morning cartoon. It's like any kind of, I guess the word I'm looking for is escalation. Where it takes the thing that you loved about the show and really makes it big for the big screen. That's I mean, I like Star Trek Generations fine, but it's not that. It's not big in the way that Transformers the movie is.
I'll tell you something. This is something that's really kind of odd that actually like that causes a little bit of an emotional feeling for me. But at the end credits, the one thing like I always make sure to watch the end credits all the way through whenever I watch it, and the main reason why is because I always get like this weird like smile, like this weird like kind of. And with a little bit of a chill when it's coming to like the very end of the end credits, and there's the Motion Picture Association of America seal on there. I was like, and right below that, it says the Transformers is a registered trademark of Hasbro Incorporated. I was like, you've come a long way. You've so come a long way in such a short time. And I am so proud to be a part of this fan base.
Absolutely. So cool. Yeah. Well, we could talk for a very long time, and I'm sure we will have to at another time. But I think our time comes to our end. I don't know what I'm doing there. I apparently forgot how to speak. George, author, voice actor, audiobook narrator. The podcast is Excelsior Journeys, and thank you so much for taking the time. This was an absolute blast.
Oh, absolutely! I had so much fun doing this. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. And before we part ways for now, could you let folks know where we can find you on the internet, how we can connect with you on the social medias, and anything else that you want to plug while we're here?
Absolutely. You can find me on, at my home base is at he'sgotit.com, as in by George He's Got It. That you can get the samples of, like some of the books that I've narrated. You can find out about how you can purchase the books directly from me, get some signed copies sent over to you. You can also access the podcast. And I say podcast plural because there's Excelsior Journeys, and then there's a limited series that I did which focuses on all the Marvel movies that are outside the Marvel studio of the MCU. So it's called From Dusk Till Dark Outside the Marvel Studios. And that was a fun show to do. It was part of the National Podcast Post-Month Challenge. So where you're basically like recording like a 10-minute episode every day for 30 days in November. So I did that in 2019, had a lot of fun doing it. I sense a future for that show like very soon. I just got to figure out how I'm going to spin it and see what I can do with it. The quality, kind of ebbs and flows because I was recording it through my, on my phone. So that part of it is what it is. But it was just like each episode is my thoughts on that particular Marvel movie that's outside of the MCU. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter under the same name at George Sirois, and it's spelled Sirois. And you can also find me on Facebook. You can find the Excelsior Journeys podcast, and you can find my author page both on Facebook.
Very cool. Well, again, George, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
All right, and that will wrap things up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and if you want to listen to all of my past shows, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever the heck else you listen to your podcasts, and check out the full show archive out on SoundCloud. 5 years and over 300 episodes worth of shows there, and join us again for the Mike Seibert Radio Podcast live stream that is streaming on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. Like, share, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you'd like and what you'd like to hear more of in the future. For my guest, George Sirois, my name is Mike. This has been Mike Seibert Radio, and until next time, tell all our one, make good choices.